Good afternoon, everyone. It is Wednesday. Yes, okay. I wanted to make sure that we are live on the air. Good afternoon, everyone. It is Wednesday, February the 24th, 2021. It is currently 12:18 p.m. Central Time. I apologize. I was just eating because, I'm starving to death. So I wanted to go home. I wanted to go home to get some food, but again, it's 20 minutes all the way back home and then 20 minutes all the way back here. So I'm just going to stay here and try to do as many live broadcasts as I can. I have some snacks here. So I was snacking. I've got some water here. And I don't even have Dasani. So that's how bad things have gotten. No, yeah, getting bottled water right now in Texas is not such an easy task. So we found some. I don't even know where we found it. I don't even know what brand this is. It's probably, I don't know what it is. But yeah, what is this called? Let me look. This is called Niagara. Yeah, Niagara Purified Drinking Water. I guess what this is. So yeah, it's not very good. It's not, you know how I feel. If it's not Dasani, it's not water. But yeah, so I'm drinking it. There we have it. So I'm losing my voice a little bit, but you know what? Hey, it's the middle of the afternoon. I don't know. Maybe you're listening to me live. Maybe you're on your lunch hour. I don't know what you're doing, but we're gonna continue on. We're gonna press on with our Bible study exercise on the subject of ignorance. I am really convinced that this is such an important topic. Obviously, all the different things that we do and study, I believe are important, all right? So there's so many things that we're working on now. I hope you're listening to everything. I just did a live session with the VBC Bible Institute and podcast. If you're not subscribed to the VBC Bible Institute and podcast, you hurt my feelings. Please subscribe. We're going to try to get that going again and try to get back in doing consistent teaching for the Bible Institute. I'm going to try to do that. And then we've got all the different series that we're doing here on Theology Essentials. So here's my goal for this afternoon. Here's my goal. We're going to work on this Bible study exercise on the subject of ignorance by going back to the book of Hosea. I'm going to give you some basic information, try to lead you through a Bible study exercise. We are going to come to an exegetical problem. An interpretive problem. We have a verse in Hosea that nobody seems to agree on how to interpret the verse or even how it should be translated. So we're not going to get a lot of the answers that we may want. We'll get some answers, but we're going to get to that problem. And then I'm going to attempt to do one more live broadcast on the Christian in complete armor. We're going to begin chapter 2 of that book. So that is the goal. So hopefully you're listening to everything that we're doing. And as always, if you're listening to me live, feel free to jump into the chat. Feel free to say hello. You can anyone can chat with me. It doesn't cost money. All you have to do is have the Spreaker app, hit the little chat icon, and you can say, hey, I got a question about this. I got a question about this. And there you go. Are you ready? I hope you're ready. Hosea chapter 4. Hosea chapter 4. Hosea chapter 4, verse 6, we read this in verse 6. These are the words of Hosea chapter 4, verse 6. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, because thou hast rejected knowledge. I will also reject thee, that thou shalt be no priest to me, seeing thou hast forgotten the law of thy God. I will also forget thy children. Now, I've talked a lot about the ignorance facing the American church. In the last Bible study exercise we did on the subject, I spent a lot of time on it, and how some people are looking to try to solve that problem, which I think is completely unbiblical. So what we're going to do for this episode, instead of getting back into all of that, we're going to try to figure out what's going on in Hosea, right? We're going to try to get some background. We're going to try to get some information. We're going to try to answer some questions about this text, and we're going to try to work on it. Remember, you're supposed to be creating an outline of Hosea chapter 4. Please do that. I've already given you a number of assignments. Please work on those assignments. Again, these Bible study exercises it's not for me just to teach you. It's to get you to participate. And if you're going to get anything out of them, you've got to do your part. All right. Are you ready? Okay. So here we go. Let's get some background. Let's do this. Let's start with some background to the book of Hosea, because I think this is important for historical purposes. All right. Here's some basic background. Hosea is called to be a prophet during the closing days of Jeroboam the second, I believe. I believe it's Jeroboam the second. Hang on. Let me verify. I want to make sure I've got my I don't want to give you wrong information. And sometimes when I write something down in my notes, I'll look at it and go like, I don't know if that's exactly. Let me look here. Give me 1 second. Got a Bible dictionary. I just had one sitting here right next to me, so I thought, you know what, this will be perfect to look at. Okay, let me look here. I'm going to make sure of something. Give me 1 second. All right. This doesn't make for good listening, but it makes it good for making sure that you get correct information. Give me 1 second here. All right. Yeah, Jeroboam. Okay, yes. Okay, I wanted to make sure. Jeroboam, we'll call him Jeroboam the second. You have Jeroboam. Jeroboam the first was the first king of Israel, the 10 northern tribes of the northern kingdom, a state established after the death of Solomon. All right, we'll call him Jeroboam the second, the 14th king of Israel, who reigned for 41 years, 793 to 753 BC. To 753 BC. So let me get this again. Jeroboam II was the 14th king of Israel, who reigned for 41 years, 793 BC to 753 BC. Jeroboam was the son and successor of Joash. All right, and then that goes into more of his family line. Okay, fine. So wanted to make sure that we had this correct. So Hosea is called to be a prophet during the closing days of the reign of Jeroboam II. Right, just make sure we have that, all right? Although Israel at this time was enjoying a time of political peace and material prosperity, so it was a time of political peace and material prosperity. So there was peace and there was prosperity. So things were going really well. All right. Sometimes when things are going really well, there can be great spiritual danger lying right there that we don't even see because everything is going well. But while everything was going well, the nation, listen, was rife with moral corruption and spiritual bankruptcy. There was more, even though there was a time of political peace and material prosperity, there was corruption and, as one commentary puts it, moral corruption. Moral corruption and spiritual bankruptcy. Moral corruption and spiritual bankruptcy. Even though it was a time of political peace and material prosperity. I want you to hear that again. All right? Everything can be going well. Look, there are two ways which you can face great difficulty in your Christian life. There are two areas where you can face great danger in your Christian life. That can be times of great difficulty, and it can be times of what we will call great blessing. I just taught this in the VBC Bible Institute, and we kind of get a picture of it right here. Things are going well, but things are not going well spiritually. Sometimes if everything is going well from a materialistic way, like there's great prosperity, there's great peace, there's health, everything's going well in our lives, we sometimes then become, listen to what I'm about to say. Sometimes, and we'll call it blessing, times of great blessing can make you blind to moral corruption and spiritual bankruptcy. The times of the greatest blessing, sometimes the times where you experience the greatest blessing in your life, where you become blind to spiritual bankruptcy and moral corruption. Because everything seems going well, so you think you're okay. That is a great danger. I think one of the dangers that come from a time of blessing is blindness. I'm just going to throw that. You can again. Remember, I try with these Bible study exercises not to do the teaching. I try to throw out these ideas to get you telling me what you think. But we see it right here, right? They were enjoying a time of political peace and material prosperity, but the nation was rife with moral corruption and spiritual bankruptcy. Now, Jeroboam II's death ushered in anarchy, and the nation rapidly declined. During the next 20 years, leading up to the complete overthrow by Assyria, so that means this is the northern kingdom, all right? So for the next 20 years, Israel experienced 6 short reigns, 4 of which were ended by assassination. So things were seemingly were going okay on the surface, but below the surface, there was a moral corruption and spiritual bankruptcy. Then this king dies, and then everything falls into anarchy. Everything goes crazy. And you go from one king to another king, 4 assassinations, and the next thing you know, Assyria comes in and completely overthrows everything. Is it possible that the time of blessing, apparent blessing, or at least outward blessing, led to a blindness, and they were not able to see what was coming? Hosea spoke for God during those chaotic times. His message was filled with warnings against Israel's moral waywardness and her violation of the covenant relationship that she had with the Lord. So there was a warning. Hey, judgment is coming. Judgment is coming. Look at your moral corruption. Look at your spiritual bankruptcy. Look at how faithful you had become and have become and are being. That's what's going on. That's the situation. So let's go back to Hosea chapter 4. My people, the northern kingdom, Israel, my people are destroyed for the lack of knowledge. Now, could we say possibly that they were being destroyed, spiritually speaking? Right? Like instead of looking for destruction of was bad things happening to them, we could see the possible decay. I mean, chaos was beginning to reign in society with all of these kings, one after another, and they were getting ready to go into Assyria. Assyria was about basically to overthrow them. Is it possible, and I'm just throwing this out there, again, remember, Bible study exercise, I'm trying to get you thinking, my people are destroyed, my people, the northern kingdom of Israel, are being destroyed for a lack of knowledge. Are they being destroyed and that destruction is referring to their spiritual bankruptcy and moral corruption? All right. Now, they're being destroyed for a lack of knowledge. What knowledge were they lacking? What was going on? Why were they lacking knowledge? What knowledge were they lacking? Well, let's consider some more information here. All right. Listen carefully to this. When Jeroboam I set up his own religious system in Israel, many of the true priests fled to Judah, so the king ordained priests of his own choosing. Of course, these counterfeit priests knew neither the Lord nor his law. They were primarily interested in having an easy job that would provide them with food, clothing, and pleasure, especially opportunities to be with the shrine prostitutes. Don't blame the people for what's happening, Hosea said to the corrupt priests, because they're only following your bad example. So the reason they're having a lack of knowledge is because they had basically fraudulent priests who weren't doing their job. Is that what's happening? And when it says Hosea was warning the people, or warning the priests, don't blame the people, they're following you. This gets into a question of a specific verse here where there's some question in how to interpret it. We'll get to that in a minute. But so we have my people. Remember, that's one of the things I told you to figure out. Being destroyed for a lack of knowledge. Maybe the destruction was their own moral decline. That was the destruction. It was spiritual destruction that they were experiencing, and that spiritual destruction was ultimately manifesting itself in the chaos that was happening around them, and then the overthrow. Is that the overthrow is that the ultimate destruction? So there's a lot of different ways we can go there. And why were they lacking knowledge? What was leading to this lack of knowledge? Is it possible that when Jeroboam I set up his own religious system and end up with these false priests were the reason to be blamed, and they should be blamed. All right? Now, listen to this commentary. When you obey God's word, you walk in light and don't stumble. But when you reject God's word, you walk in the darkness and cannot find your way. Worldly and ignorant spiritual leaders produce worldly and ignorant people, and this brings destruction to the land. All right? Now look at Hosea chapter 4. Let's go. In fact, let's just start back in verse 1. All right, let's start in verse 1. All right, this is giving us some background. Now I want to kind of just work through some of this for this Bible study exercise. All right, give me 1 second. All right, I had to cough there. All right, here we go. Hosea chapter 4, verse 1. All right, now let's work through this. Hear the word of the Lord, ye children of Israel, for the Lord hath a controversy with the inhabitants of the land, because there is no truth, nor mercy, nor knowledge of God in the land. All right, let's stop right here. God is upset with the northern tribes of Israel, with the northern kingdom. He's upset with the northern kingdom, and he's got a controversy with them because there are three things missing in the land. Three things missing in the land. There is no truth, there is no mercy, and there is no knowledge of God. Now, I will argue you cannot have truth without the knowledge of God, and you will not have mercy without the knowledge of God. God is the ultimate source of truth, and he's the ultimate source of mercy because he defines what is good and right. He defines what is loving and what is, and he tells us what mercy is. He shows us what mercy is. So if you don't have God, you don't have everything else falls apart. Everything else falls. Without God, no truth, no mercy. No, you don't even have morality in any meaningful way other than the morality that you create. Verse 2. By swearing and lying and killing and stealing and committing adultery, they break out and blood touched blood. Therefore shall the land mourn, and everyone that dwelleth therein shall languish with the beast of the field and with the fowls of heaven. Yea, the fishes of the sea also shall be taken away. Okay, judgment is coming. The land has reached the point where there is no knowledge of God, there's no mercy, and there is no truth. That's where they were. That's where they were. And they're there ultimately because of a lack of knowledge. And now he warns of the destruction that is coming. Now look here. Verse 4 is the controversial verse. And there's lots of disagreement on this, all right? Yet let no man strive, nor reprove another. For thy people are as they that strive with the priest. Yet let no man strive, nor reprove another, for thy people are as they that strive with the priest. Now, what exactly is going on here? Well, let's look up Hosea, and if I say Hebrews one more time, I keep thinking I'm saying Hebrews. Hosea chapter 4. Let's look this up because we need to do a little work here. All right? We need to do a little work. All right? Give me 1 second here. What I'm going to do, and I would challenge you to do the same thing, just look up Hosea chapter 4, Hosea 4:4, in a Google search bar. The first thing that's going to come up is going to be an entry from BibleHub.com. Pull up BibleHub.com, and one thing you're going to get every English translation. This is all free. You're going to get every English translation, and that's going to give us to see how other translations handled this verse, because Hosea 4:4 is very interesting in figuring out what's going on here, all right? So let's do this. Here we go. Here's how the New International Version handles Hosea 4:4. But let no one bring a charge, let no one accuse another, for your people are like those who bring charges against a priest. All right. New Living Translation. Don't point your fingers at someone else and try to pass the blame. My complaint, you priest, is with you. Now that really adds a clear way that they're handling it. What they're arguing is what's going on in Hosea chapter 4, verse 4, is that Hosea is talking to the priest. Let no man strive nor reprove another. Hey, don't sit there and try to point your finger at anybody else. For thy people are as they that strive with the priest. They're translating this. The people are acting like you. I'm blaming you. You're the ones to be blamed. The King James doesn't really capture that idea that way. We're going to have to figure this out. There's a difficulty here in how to translate this verse, and we'll work on it. But I just want you to see already what's going on. Something's happening here. Hosea, he's clearly laid out what's going wrong in the land. He clearly warns of the destruction that is coming. Now, what is he doing in verse 4? He's putting who is being blamed here? Are the people being blamed? Are the priests being blamed? What's going on here? Again, the New Living Translation. Don't point your finger at someone else and try to pass the blame. My complaint, you priest, is with you. ESV. Yet let no one contend and let none accuse, for with you is my contention, O priest. Hey, look, you're the ones, priest, you're at fault. It's you, spiritual leaders. These fake priests that were put there by Jeroboam the first, they're the problem. The real priest abandoned and left, and went to Judah, and now they got these fake priests, and now these fake priests, this bad spiritual leadership, this bad teaching has now led to this destruction, and this destruction had occurred that there's no truth, no mercy, no knowledge of God, because the people are being destroyed for a lack of knowledge. And who is to blame? The priest, the spiritual leadership. Let's continue. Berean Study Bible. But let no man contend, let no man offer reproof, for your people are like those who contend with a priest. Right now, see, now what is that saying? Right? The people, so is that putting the blame on the people? The people are like those who contend with the priest, who argue, who won't listen to their spiritual leadership. The King James, let no man strive nor reprove another, for thy people are as they that strive with the priest. The New King James, now let no man contend or rebuke another, for your priests are like those who contend with the priest. Right? Who's getting the fault here? All right. So, and I could go through translation after translation after translation. Let's see how some of the commentaries handle this. All right. Because there's a lot of difficulties here trying to figure this out. All right. Here we go. The last clause of this verse is rendered by nearly all versions and commentators, though thy people are as those who contend with the priests, are guilty as those who transgress the teaching of the Torah by defying the instructions of the priest. So I said most commentaries and versions treat this as that you're as guilty as those who transgress the teaching of the law by defying the instructions of the priest. There were people who would not listen to the priest, and you're just as guilty. Now, is he saying now if there are false priests there, it doesn't make any sense that they should be listening to them, or is through Hosea is saying you're like people who wouldn't listen to the priest because you wouldn't listen to me, the prophet, you wouldn't listen to God. Is that a possible way? This commentary goes on to say this. Other commentaries gives a different rendering, which is better adapted to the denunciations of the priest in the following verses. Now, they say later on, look at, if you go to Hosea chapter 6, verse 9. If you go to Hosea chapter 6, verse 9. We read this, Hosea chapter 6, verse 9. Is that 6:9? And as troops of robbers wait for a man, so the company of priests murder in the way by consent, for they commit lewdness. So he says later on in Hosea, he's condemning the priest. Well, if he's condemning the priest later on, why wouldn't he be condemning the priest here? If the priests are bad, why would the people be condemned for not listening to the priest? All right, I think that makes sense, but I think he could be offering, hey, you're like the people who don't listen to the priest because you're not listening to God, you're not listening to his prophet. You could possibly may interpret it or try to translate it that way. They go on to say this. This different rendering that puts the blame on the priest is better adapted to the denunciations of the priest in the following verses, Hosea chapter 6, verse 9. By a slight change in the punctuation of the Hebrew, we obtain the interpretation, and thy people, O priest, are as my adversaries. They says, okay, yeah, and then they try to get into all the grammar of why you should do it that way. But so that, and thy people, O priest, are as my adversaries. See, the priest, you've become my adversaries. You've become my adversaries. In other words, hey, the priest, I think we could almost interpret it this way. Priest, you're like the people who don't listen to a good priest. You're like the people who don't listen to the priest, and your priest are my adversaries because you don't listen to God. You're not listening to me. And as a result of you not listening to me, the people are suffering because of a lack of knowledge. You're suffering. I mean, obviously in this context, the way the people are going to obtain the knowledge of God has to be from the prophets and the priests. They're not all carrying around a Bible. They got to rely on their spiritual leaders. So I think you have to put it right there. If you go to, if you're at BibleHub.com, you can look at all the different commentaries and you can read them for yourself about how you want to interpret it. But let's go back to Hosea chapter 4, and we'll offer some thoughts here. All right, let's put this all together now. Let's put this all together. All right, so we got the background. Background, Jeroboam II. Everything seems to be going well for the people. It's a time of prosperity, political peace. Everything's going great. However, at that very same time, there's a major problem going on in the country. The people are morally corrupt. The people are spiritually bankrupt. Jeroboam II dies, chaos ensues. 6 rapid successions of different leaders, 4 are assassinated, boom, everything crumbles apart. The Assyrians ultimately take over. Hosea is ministering in the midst of all of this chaos, warning the people, calling to the people to repent, trying to illustrate that these people have become spiritually unfaithful. They've become spiritual adulterers. He's trying to demonstrate this. He demonstrates this. He tries to show this not only as a preaching, but he becomes a living example of what's going on in Israel. All right, I think we can clearly identify all of that. There's a broader historical context that seems to say Jeroboam I instituted basically his own religious system with his own priest. And that all the way back from Jeroboam I, all the way now to Jeroboam II, the 14th king, after all of that time, these priests are just fraudulent priests who are more worried about engaging in all kinds of lewd, ungodly acts instead of teaching the people. And now the land is reaping the consequences. The spiritual ignorance is now swept across the land, and the land is suffering greatly. That seems to be what's going on. So let's put it all back together. Hosea chapter 4, verse 1, hear the word of the Lord, you children of Israel, for the Lord hath a controversy with the inhabitants of the land. There is no truth, nor mercy, nor knowledge of God in the land. That's kind of an overview of what's going on. What's happening in the land? God is upset with them. Why? 3 reasons. No truth, no mercy, no knowledge of God in the land. I think that's something you really should meditate on. Right? Now, as a result of this, what's going on? Verse 2, by swearing and lying and killing and stealing and committing adultery, they break out and blood toucheth blood. There's the general consensus of what's going on. This is how, there's kind of like the theological problem. There's no knowledge of God. There's no truth. There's no mercy. How is this playing out in the practical way? Well, you got lying, stealing, murdering. You've got just chaos going on. What's going on in verse 3? Therefore the land shall mourn, and every one that dwelleth therein shall languish with the beasts of the field and with the fowls of heaven. Yea, the fishes of the sea also shall be taken away. What is he saying in verse 3? Hey, the Assyrians are coming. You're about to be overthrown. Now, verse 4. Yet let no man strive, nor reprove another, for thy people are as they that striveth with the priest. Now, we stop with verse 4. A lot of different ways of translating it. If we translate it in one way, we can say that what he is saying is, hey, stop blaming the people. You're the priest. You're at fault. You're at fault. All right, that's a possibility. He could be saying to the priest, hey, stop blaming the people. The priest, you're at fault. Some translations would put it that way. Or he could be saying, hey, priest, you act like people who don't listen to the priest because you're not listening to me. That's a possibility. Or you could say, hey, that the people are guilty of not listening to God and not listening to the prophet. Hey, stop. In other words, I think ultimately you could say everyone should stop blaming everyone because ultimately people haven't listened. If you think about it, you could really think about it this way. I think this may be trying to capture all the different interpretations. I think maybe we could just do this. Hey, the priest, you definitely haven't been listening to God. You're not doing the right thing. So you can't be blaming people. Hey, the people, you may want to blame the priest, but you're not listening to God. You're not listening to the prophet. So are the people just as guilty? Like, do we put the blame just on the priest? I think in some ways you can bring all of these ideas together. The priests aren't listening. The people aren't listening. Now, the people should have priests to listen to, and the priests do deserve the blame, but are the people listening to the prophet? Are the people remembering the words of God that has been taught to them and obeying them? Hey, wait, think of it this way. When your spiritual leader falls, if you don't have anyone teaching the word of God, you have no one being faithful to the word of God, does that excuse you from listening to the word of God that you have been taught? There's a lot of different ways we could go with that. And then we come to verse 5. Therefore shall thou fall in the day, and the prophet also shall fall with thee in thy night, and I will destroy thy mother. Therefore shall thou fall in the day, and the prophet also shall fall with thee in the night, and I will destroy thy mother. Now, this is an interesting verse. What is going on in Hosea 4:5? All right. Well, let's look up a couple of ideas here. Right. So let's do this. I'm going to go to Hosea 4:5. We're going to read this in a couple of translations. You stumble day and night, and the prophets stumble with you. So I will destroy your mother. So you will stumble in broad daylight, and your false prophets will fall with you in the night. Now there adds a little who these prophets are. The false prophets, the false spiritual leaders are going to fall with you. You're going to fall and the leaders. So if we go back to verse 4, the priests nobody is listening to God. That's the bottom line. The prophets, you got false prophets, you got false priests, everyone, no one's listening to God. I think that adds a little idea. And they're all going to fall. Now, please note, I will destroy your mother. I will destroy your mother. What do you think that's a reference to? I will destroy your mother. I will destroy your mother. What do you think that? I'm going to go to my notes here, all right? Now, I want you to listen to this carefully, all right? Now, this is back to my notes. When you obey God's word, you walk in the light and don't stumble. But when you reject the word, you walk in the darkness and can't find your way. Worldly and ignorant spiritual leaders produce worldly and ignorant people, and this brings destruction to the land. The phrase, your mother, in Hosea 4:5, refers to the nation of Israel, right? As goes spiritual leadership, so goes the church. As goes the church, so goes morality. As goes morality, so goes the nation. God's people are both salt and light in society. When they are corrupt, society becomes corrupt. Now, I want you to hear that all again, all right? Listen to this carefully. Worldly and ignorant spiritual leadership produces worldly and ignorant people, and this brings destruction to the land. The phrase, your mother, in Hosea 4:5 refers to the nation of Israel. I think you can see that in Hosea chapter 2, verse 2 and verse 5. And you can look that up. Remember, these Bible study exercises, I'm not trying to do the teaching. It's hard sometimes to try to teach without teaching, right? Because I'm trying to get you involved in the process, all right? Now, listen to this carefully. As goes spiritual leadership, so goes the church. As goes the church, so goes morality. And as goes morality, so goes the nation. God's people are both salt and light in society, and when they are corrupt, society becomes corrupt. Well, look at the corruption in the church. Now, we'll always have corruption in the church. Let's make that very clear. We'll always have corruption in the church. That's why we have to trust in Jesus Christ. We'll always keep that in mind. But when this corruption, this darkness, this ignorance begins to spread, and it starts with spiritual leaders who are ignorant, or let's say this, even if they're not ignorant, the spiritual leaders fail to do their job of taking care of this spiritual ignorance. Remember in our last session and our last episode of the Bible study exercise on the subject of ignorance, part 2, we read an article about church leaders wringing their hands about biblical illiteracy. They're not doing anything to fix it. And then that leads to ignorance. And that leads to ignorance. Once the ignorance happens, the morality goes. Once the morality goes, everything begins to fall apart, which begins to impact the nation. Remember, we don't change the nation politically. We change the nation by living out our Christian life and our lives in a meaningful way, trying to be salt and light. Now, we're never going to do it perfectly, but obviously we are to strive to do so. And you could argue that Israel, in some ways, was to be salt and light, and Israel never, ever lived up to what they were called to do, because we never fulfill that perfectly. All right? God rejected Jeroboam's man-made religion and warned the priests that their easy jobs would soon end in disaster. Instead of seeking God God's will, they consulted their idols. The more the people sinned, the more food the priest enjoyed. The more shrines the people built, the more they and the priest could indulge in lustful pleasures as they participated in the fertility rites. But the rites wouldn't accomplish anything because God would cause the population and the produce to decrease instead of increase. Furthermore, the priest owned daughters and daughters-in-law would become shrine prostitutes and commit adultery. Their sins would bring judgment to their families and to the land. Now, let's read here a little bit more, all right? Let's read it all back to Hosea 4:1. Hear the word of the Lord, ye children of Israel, for the Lord hath a controversy with the inhabitants of the land, because there is no truth, nor mercy, nor knowledge of God in the land. Now, just remember those three things. By swearing, lying, killing, stealing, and committing adultery, they break out, blood toucheth blood. Therefore shall the land mourn, and every one that dwelleth therein shall languish with the beasts of the field, and with the fowls of heaven, yea, the fish of the sea also shall be taken away. Yet let no man strive, nor reprove another, for thy people are as they that strive with the priest. All right, and again, we looked at all the different ways of interpreting that. I think nobody was listening to God. Bottom line. And they're like the people who would not listen to the priest. And I think that's a reference to Deuteronomy 17:12. I think there's a cross-reference there of Deuteronomy 17:12. You may want to look that up. Again, I don't want to do all of the teaching for you. All right. It's hard sometimes to teach this way because I try to design some of these Bible study exercises where I just say, here, you do it all. And then sometimes I want to do, I can't stop myself from trying to do most of it for you. But I know I want you to participate. All right. Verse 5. Therefore shalt thou fall in the day, and the prophets also shall fall with thee in the night, and I will destroy thy mother. So here's what's going to happen. The people are going to fall, the false prophets are going to fall, and Israel is going to fall. Assyria is about to overthrow them. My people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will also reject thee, that thou shalt be no priest to me. Seeing thou hast forgotten the law of thy God, I will also forget thy children. Hey, God, these people are all being destroyed, and now judgment is coming, right? And you say, what knowledge? I think the knowledge they were lacking is they had completely forgotten the law of God. You could argue they forgot their responsibilities laid out under the covenant of what they were supposed to do. You could see Deuteronomy. If you do this, this happens. If you don't do this, you do this. Remember, there were some requirements there, and we could get into that covenant and all the things there. We could go a lot of different directions with this, but just understand the people are being destroyed for a lack of knowledge. Ignorance is what's destroying them. That's what I want you to see. Ignorance is what was destroying them. Ignorance will destroy us. Spiritual ignorance will destroy us. Verse 7, as they were increased, so they sinned against me. Therefore will I change their glory into shame. In other words, as they were increased, the more they got, the more increase there was, the more they sinned. They eat up the sin of my people, and they set their heart on their iniquity. And there shall be like people, like priests, and I will punish them for their ways and reward them their doings. For they shall eat and not have enough. They shall commit whoredom and shall not increase, because they have left off to take heed of the Lord. Now, all their sin, it's not going to benefit them. It's not going to benefit them. All right? I'll stop right there. Now, I still want you to work on an outline. As I'm looking at the chapter, it's going to be a challenge to try to outline this. It's going to be a challenge to try to outline it. But do your best in outlining. I still want to see someone's outline. I want to see what they come up with and how to do Hosea chapter 4. All right? Now, I want to end by reading something to you. All right? Here we go. Ignorance is bliss, right? Or is it? What you do not know cannot hurt you, or can it? I want you to hear that again. Ignorance is bliss, right? Or is it? What you do not know cannot hurt you, or can it? The saying, ignorance is bliss, originated in a poem by Thomas Gray. The quote goes, where ignorance is bliss, it is folly to be wise. Where ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise. Many often say it this way: you were probably better off not knowing that. But tell that to the children of Israel who were instructed in Leviticus 4-5 as to what was required for a sin offering if they, whether individually or nationally, had sinned in ignorance and disobeyed the law of God. Think also of the Apostle Paul's admonition to henceforth walk not as other Gentiles walk, and the vanity of their minds, having the understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God through the ignorance that is in them because of the blindness of their heart. In Romans chapter 10, Paul accused Israel of being ignorant of God's righteousness and going about to establish their own righteousness. For the unbelieving heart is a critical matter if one is ignorant of God's truth and offer of salvation. Through the prophet Hosea, Jehovah said to the children of Israel, my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge because they have rejected knowledge. I will reject thee. So, dear friend, think long and hard about the claims that ignorance is bliss and what you don't know can't hurt you. Your eternal destiny hangs in the balance with respect to God's revealed truth. Do not be fooled by the smooth talk of your enemy, the devil. He wants you bound by sin, but God wants to redeem you from sin. Ignorance is not really bliss, and what you do not know can hurt you for all eternity. That's from a devotional guide that started this whole study of ignorance. And I wanted to go where I really wanted to spend some time, and I ended up following the Hosea. I want to spend some time in Ephesians 4:17 through 18. It's what I really want to spend some time on, Ephesians 4:17 through 18. But I decided to go to Hosea 4 because it's just an interesting passage there. People are destroyed with a lack of knowledge. All right, now you have a better understanding of what was going on in Hosea. And I think we can understand that, look, spiritual leaders, you have a responsibility to fix the ignorance in the church. But in many cases, listen, it's the spiritual leaders who are causing the spiritual ignorance. But that spiritual ignorance will lead to destruction. So I need you to honestly look into your life and see, where are you ignorant? Are you ignorant? Remember, I told you what to do. Go through the table of contents. Look at the Bible and rate yourself between a 1 and a 5. 1, you don't really know that book at all. 5, you know it perfectly. You could pass a test. Go through each book and see which ones you're ignorant on. Email me that list, and I will do what I can to help fix that ignorance. How ignorant are you on the subject of theology? If you've never read a systematic theology, if you've never studied systematic theology, we need to fix that. Give yourself a rating between a 1 through a 5. You could pass a theology test no matter how hard it was, or you would fail faster than you could say, I can say your name. And 3, how well do you know church history? Spiritual ignorance is devastating. It is destroying the church. And what some are suggesting, as we saw in our last episode, or the last Bible study exercise episode that we did, some people think the solution is creating an online seminary and charging you $77 per month so that you can attend and fix your biblical illiteracy. And remember, that online seminary that we talked about is designed for lay people. No, you don't need a seminary. You should be getting a seminary education every time you go to church. But this podcast is going to do everything I can to fight this problem of ignorance. This is a major problem, and I'm going to keep talking about it until I can't talk about it, and I'm about to lose my voice, so I may have to stop right now. All right, I'll stop right there. All right, hopefully that was helpful. I give you something to do. I'm just going to keep leaving it in your hands. Hosea chapter 4. Again, if I said Hebrews anywhere in this, I apologize. Hosea chapter 4. I want you to write out that outline. Outline Hosea chapter 4. Please do that. All right, simple outline. It's going to be kind of hard how to organize it, but I'm very interested to see what you guys come up with, all right? Email it to me, newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. All right, I need food. I'm going to go home and get some food. Everyone have a great day. God bless.